Hi, my name is Shira Rubinoff, and I'm here with Sam Hector, Ecosystem Sales Leader, IBM Security UK and Ireland. Sam, pleasure to be talking with you again.
Hey, Shira, pleasure to join you. Thank you.
Excellent. So, Sam, IBM released a threat intelligence report, and we'd love to talk about some of the highlights. And I'd like to quote a little bit from the beginning. And the top attack type, ransomware, obviously, was again top attack type in 2021. Although the percentage of ransomware attacks X-Force remediated decreased nearly 9% year over year, Revil was the most common ransomware strain X-Force observed for a second year, making up 37% of all ransomware attacks, followed by Ryuk at 13%. Law enforcement activity has probably been the primary force driving down ransomware, as well as IoT botnet attacks in 2021. But this does not preclude a potential resurgence in 2022, as we all seem to see coming. Everyone is expecting this threat report to focus on ransomware and Log4j, obviously, and we'll dive into that in a moment. But I wanted to ask you what you found to be some of the surprising facts.
Yeah, some of the more surprising things. We'll park ransomware and Log4j, shall we? Because there's plenty we can talk about on those.
Certainly, yes.
Some of the more surprising things I think that we discovered in the report were things like the rise of Linux ransomware and the rise of malware targeting Linux platforms. We discovered a 146% increase year over year in ransomware targeting free and open source Linux platform. And traditionally, we haven't really paid close attention to Linux as an operating system that we believe is actively being exploited in this way. But of course, what we saw throughout 2021 is that new vulnerabilities gave attackers new inroads into platforms that we previously thought of as highly secure, robust, and mature. So that was one of the surprising things I think we found. The other thing that is, I don't know if it's surprising or alarming, frankly, Shira, but the rise of phishing attacks that took place as a kind of flash in a pan type attack. So what we found was that criminal gangs would stand up pages online and kind of SMS attacks to impersonate firms, but on a very, very short-term basis. Normally we think of brands like, Microsoft and Google and Apple as being quite heavily exploited by attackers. But actually what we found throughout 2021 is that gangs would flip between lots and lots of different attacks and measure what was the most effective firm to impersonate from a phishing point of view. Exactly. And it was the short-termism and the rapid ability to adapt to the most successful attack methods and vectors that was probably surprising and a little bit alarming as well.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure that all leaning towards the necessary wanting to get information. So talking about ransomware, what's changed this year and how should clients react going forward?
Well, I think, what's changed this year is not necessarily what we focused on in terms of ransomware. I think ransomware is going to be a persistent threat and something that our industry is going to need to tackle for an ongoing basis, simply because it's so profitable. And, one thing that didn't change last year is that it's still the top attack type that we observed in 2021. Globally, it accounted for about 1 in every 5 attacks that we observed. There was some interesting kind of geographic variations, like in the UK, it was actually significantly lower than globally, which is going to be interesting to dig into and find out the reasoning. Go and download the report if you want to see more. But equally, I think that's driven by the commoditization and the ease of access to this technology. You've got these two factors which are significantly accelerating and maintaining the pace of ransomware. It's the fact that gangs typically have a lifespan of about 17 months, we found. More on that in the report. And how gangs can spin up and shut down and relaunch themselves when they start catching heat really, really quickly. That's pretty alarming. But the two factors are, look, it's still highly profitable. We're seeing double, if not triple, exploitation of ransoms. And also the availability of this technology, being available on the darknet as a SaaS platform, makes it incredibly easy for attackers to spin up groups and kind of relaunch efforts when they do catch that heat from law enforcement. So ransomware hasn't gone away, I'm afraid.
Yes, unfortunately, that's what we all see. No, thank you for that insight. And obviously, we have to talk about Log4j and how big of an issue that has been for everybody, and more typically, how has it been for your clients?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question. It caused the security industry, it caused people not to see their families in December. Yeah. And, that's never a fun thing to see. The security industry was really working overtime to try and bring this vulnerability back under control. We saw a 33% increase year over year of attacks that used vulnerability exploitation as their inroad. Interestingly, Shira, what we saw is 4 out of 5 of those vulnerabilities, 4 of the top 5 vulnerabilities exploited last year were new in 2021. Yeah. And that really reinforces the fact that, all organizations need to have a robust and well-tested incident response program. And they also need to consider moving towards architectures like a zero trust model, yes. Which, you cannot avoid vulnerabilities being discovered. You cannot avoid vulnerabilities existing in your enterprise, but what you can do is significantly mitigate the impact and the attack surface that attackers have to exploit when that vulnerability is discovered in your network. So there's all sorts of things you can do with zero trust, like microsegmentation to kind of protect yourself as much as possible. But then you really have to look, what do we do in the worst case scenario? Do we have well-tested incident response programs? Is everyone aware of where to go? The interesting thing about Log4j specifically is that it ranked as the number 2 exploited vulnerability last year, despite existing for 1/12 of the time that we had to observe in that period. So it really punched above its weight. And I think a large part of that is how prevalent, Log4j was in terms of the Java stack, and how deployed it had been. But also it made mainstream news, right? This was the likes of like a Heartbleed you could compare it to, but probably even more kind of impactful and awareness behind Log4j. So, you had people that were not previously really interested, spinning up attacks to try and see, look, is my favorite gaming company able to be exploited through Log4j? And you had GitHub pages standing up, pages and pages of screenshots of organizations that were vulnerable to it. So it almost became a bit of a game to see who could discover the vulnerabilities in the wild. So look, it made a huge impact and clearly punched well above its weight in terms of the other vulnerabilities, particularly as it was only around for such a short period of time. So concerning, but it's more about the lessons that we learned from it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your lens into the intelligence report. And everyone should take a look at your threat intelligence report. I think there's valuable insight in it. And thank you for highlighting some of the most important parts of it. And again, very much enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Pleasure.